I'm interested in um, you kind of talking more about those moments of solidarity with Palestinian relatives, right? So, like the delegations to Palestine, and also like kind of hearing more about how the settler entity of Israel directly impacts Ottoman land and people, because that's, I think, something that people here in the US fail to realize. It's like Israel's committing a genocide, right, against Palestinian people right now that is fully with the support and funding with the US, right? It would be impossible for them to do what they're doing without US tax dollars. And so, but another thing that I think people miss is that Israel actually has a hand in displacing and genociding many other indigenous people in many other parts of the world right now, including us, including Ottoman people, um, including you know, uh, people in African countries who are victimized by the diamond trade that Israel is directly profiting from. Like, right? Israel has its hand in so many other things all over the world, even in South America, and so I feel like I want to hear you unpack that a little more, but also um, kind of just getting to the point of reminding people that Israel has its money, its funding, and its tactics from the United States. They looked at the United States playbook and how they treated us, how they developed federal Indian policy to create their genocidal, settler colonial project. And so what is happening in Palestine, like this shit is directly derivative of the genocide that has been waged against us, that continues to be waged against us, right? And yeah, yeah, I just want to kind of hear you expand on that.
The impacts of Israel on well, obviously, I mean, a lot of folks who come back from Palestine, they what we've seen, or relatives that I've talked to who've been on the ground there. Obviously, there's the wall. There's a different, like I talked about, the IFT towers, or the integrated fixed towers, which is a continual project, by the way. Um, a lot of folks who have been talking about that area, or different villages that are under the surveillance right now, probably will eventually get more surveilled. um, I think that it's that, just the infrastructures that they've built, and then obviously the checkpoints and everything. But I think the biggest hand, without people even realizing it, is that our tribal governments are afraid to say anything about the solidarity with Palestine, and I think that's the biggest part. I know there are different tribal communities who have said, "No, we stand with Palestinians," and release statements. And I think when there is silence on the tribal federal government side in our local communities, that's Israel still playing a part, because that goes back to the that still goes back to the U.S., right? That's the overseer of, like, if you say something, then we're gonna have to put in your questioning of how you're seeing how you're seeing your operations work. It's still the same thing as, like, the government still having operations over us, controlling it. So it's the still same thing. It's without it even being addressed. Like, there's no way that you can say anything against Israel, because that, again, you're against our government. Then you're a terrorist, or you're anti-American. So why are you speaking out on that? It's the same thing. Even when we talk about, oh, we're against border patrol. Oh, then you're for drug cartels. Like, I think that's the biggest part that I see and others can see, is that there are we're on the fence a lot. Our who we look to, and our positions of leadership, are always just on the fence about it. And then you see other tribal communities put out, a statement. Power shout out to those communities too, because we could learn a lot from that. And if without that solid statement, at least, then I think we're just already, we have a hand in it. We're not pushing them enough. Like, they did it. They literally have just have a statement. They've done it. And what those efforts look further now is what's going to outline for the rest of us. And and I know that there's a lot of people that have trust in They don't want to say anything or ruffle the feathers of anything. But I think without that, there's nothing that people can look towards as far as liberation, um, other than it being obviously direct action, things of that nature. But when people don't have that sort of backup or anything like that in solidarity, then it's like, well, we're letting colonialism settlers still continue the harm in our communities, and you will allow someone, if you had a Palestinian relative, you're allowing that violence to continue. You're allowing that violence to continue in any aspect of the area that we consider our home. You're allowing them to spit on you and spit on our relatives because there's not that sort of protection or understanding of what you mean with solidarity tactics. And then it just builds from there. Then it goes to the infrastructure. Then it goes to continuing getting funding. They because immigration now is a bunch of folks now, not just Mexico, but now we're seeing people coming in from other countries. Palestinians. What could that look like 10 years from now if we're saying, oh well, we already have these policies in state. It works over there in Israel, so now let's put it towards a policy specifically for Palestinian people because now we're seeing the solidarity efforts with indigenous people. So now let's start having these other ways of really putting our infrastructures on our lands to keep people being surveilled, you know, and people just live there. I have friends who just live right next to a tower not far. Grandma, grandpa, they don't know what's going on half the time, and I think that's how Israel really does. That sort of militarization. And the U.S. work on that and that sort of building that infrastructure, whatever it may be, wall, patrol, um, in any more sense of that. And now it's just gone into our tribal governments. They're scared. They're scared. Don't want to say anything, and I think that's a big part of how they're continuing to sell a colonial, narrative in a lot of ways. So yeah, thank you for that question.